Look, I know they announced that he's going to be in this new animated show, but they keep saying Qui-Gon Jinn's name in this show, and so if I don't get some Liam Neeson by the end of this series, I'm going to be pissed. Hello interwebs, I hope you are all doing well, and welcome to my review of Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 3. I am very excited to talk about this episode. If you've seen the episode, you know why, and we're going to get to it in just a second. But before I do that, just a couple quick logistical things that I want to say before we get into the fun stuff. First off, if any of you follow my main channel and watched my most recent video, you probably already know that next week I am getting some pretty major surgery. Don't worry, it's an incredibly positive surgery. I'm very excited about it, but that surgery is scheduled quite literally for a week from today. So for the next review of Obi-Wan Kenobi Part 4, I am not going to be able to get it out the day that the episode goes live because I will probably be resting and sleeping and look more beat up than Sylvester Stallone in Rocky. So don't worry, I will get the review out. It'll probably be audio only next time, and it might be a few days late depending on how I end up feeling. But I'm going to prioritize my health over, getting these reviews out. But I do want to get these reviews out because I am excited to talk about this show. But I just wanted to set that expectation going forward for this show and probably the Orville as well, which I'll start to be reviewing this week. But again, depending on how I feel, it may be a day or so late before I get to that. And also same thing with Miss Marvel as well. God, there's too many shows coming out. I do want to review Miss Marvel. Depending on how I feel, I'll get that episode review up at some point. So just know next week and possibly the week after, things will be a little bit delayed as I get healed. I know you all understand, but just wanted to let you know. The second thing that I just wanted to quick mention, it's been talked about in other areas, so I won't go too far into it here, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that Moses, the actor who plays the third sister in the show, has spoken publicly about the harassment that she received after her appearance in the first two episodes of this show. Unfortunately, while I am not particularly surprised or shocked that a black woman was receiving that type of harassment, it is sadly very common for many minority people, especially people of color, especially black women, to receive that harassment in a lot of these shows. It's still disappointing to see it, and I wish her nothing but the best. Even though I had some reservations about the character in the first episodes, she is clearly a fantastic actor, nor even if she was the worst, most terrible actor and the worst, most terrible character, which she is not on either count, by the way, she would not deserve any of that. There is no place for racism in these fandoms, even though sadly I know it is all too prevalent in way too many fandoms that I care deeply about. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that, especially because, and I'll just be open about this, if any of you follow me on Twitter, today I won't name the person, he's a stupid asshat, terrible human frickin' being, targeted me on Twitter and sent a bunch of transphobes to harass me on Twitter, which made today kind of a shitty day. I'll just be quite frank with you. So dealing with that as a trans person, it's just shitty, honestly, being a public minority person anywhere on the interwebs these days, and it sucks. That being said, there are wonderful, amazing people. I got so many wonderful, amazing messages and kind messages, so don't worry. My mental health is good. I'm focusing on other things. People are shitty. The world is sometimes shitty, but there is goodness and good people in the world. And I know many of you watching this are those people, so my love to all of you. I love and appreciate and adore you, and thank you for, even amongst this terrible shittiness that this world can sometimes fling at people, for being positive, kind, and caring. And do the same for Moses as well, because she is also wonderful. Anyways, thank you for indulging me those logistics. Let's get into talking about the fun stuff and the episode. By the way, full spoilers here, so just know that going in. So I'm going to save the Obi-Wan Vader fight for the end, because I have some thoughts on that. But before we get to that, the rest of this episode I thought was pretty solid. A lot of it was sort of what was expected after kind of what I had seen in the setup of the first two episodes, with Leia and Obi-Wan being on the run, and Leia and Obi-Wan kind of connecting. And I know some people will probably have some continuity issues with that. I'm sure you could nitpick it to death. For what it is, though, while I am not particularly shocked by the way this plot is unfolding, I am really liking its execution. Like, it's not a surprising plot, but it is a well-executed plot, and a lot of the character beats and moments that they have going throughout the episode, I think, are really, really well done. I think they are nailing the disillusionment that Obi-Wan Kenobi has with the world. There's a couple moments where I do feel like it's over the top, and sometimes how Obi-Wan is kind of snippy towards Leia. It's like, don't trust people, don't talk to people. The moment when they get to the field, like immediately when someone's not there, it's like, oh, I knew not to trust them. It's a bit quick at times, and it feels like Obi-Wan's just impatient and not willing to wait, but it does kind of feed into how he's been characterized as this disillusioned guy for so long. So I feel like it's a little bit heightened and over the top. I would have toned it probably back just a hair in some of the writing of the character. Oh, Ian McGregor is playing it wonderfully, but I do feel like it does go over the top just a hair throughout those sequences. That being said, though, the strength of this episode for me really relies on Obi-Wan and Leia's connection. I actually really loved the scenes that they had together. I loved the sort of back and forth. He's like, you don't talk at all, be quiet. But he doesn't come across as like not appreciating her outspokenness. I think in several scenes like later on, we get to see that he really does appreciate that Leia is just headstrong and says what she wants to say. And I really appreciate the sort of like understanding from Obi-Wan of like who Leia is as a person and really appreciating that. But also knowing that it's like, okay, Leia, keep it down for now. Like, we really need to protect ourselves since she's not used to being in this arena. So I like that it didn't come across as diminishing her, but just understanding that who she is as a kid does not necessarily fit this situation. And that's like a hard balance to get in a lot of the writing. Some other good moments though too, I'm loving the Padme love throughout all of this. Like Padme, especially growing up as a kid with many gender confusing moments, I adored Padme. She was one of my favorite characters on the prequel, even though she was done dirty in the third film. But she's great in all the Clone Wars stuff, and especially that like animated Clone Wars show, the like 5-minute show that they did years ago. I loved her in that. So I am appreciating all these moments where like Obi-Wan is oblongly referring to Padme, and I like that Leia eventually picks up on the facts like, you knew my mother, and she's sort of like wishing to see her, and Obi-Wan kind of able to reaffirm her hope a little bit. It's like, hey, your father is actually trying to do better in the world. I thought that was a nice moment to start Obi-Wan's arc towards having a little bit more hope in the world by seeing that through Leia, as well as some of the other people that he's encountering on his trip as like good people along the way, like the Empire officer who saves them towards the end of the episode. And so I just liked those small moments of like starting to push Obi-Wan to have a more positive outlook. I also really enjoyed the scene where Obi-Wan has vague recollections of his family, and I never really thought about that, but we never really do learn about Obi-Wan's biological family that he was taken from by the Jedi. And it kind of underscores subtly the reasons that Anakin himself kind of turned to the dark side and the problems with the Jedi, and I like that being underscored here. But I also like that it was a way for him to connect to Leia's adoptive family and saying for him that, oh, your family's no less than any other, they can still love you. So I liked how this was used both to underscore the problems with the Jedi, but also allow Obi-Wan to connect with Leia. It was a very smartly done moment. That being said, though, one of my favorite bits of this episode was the farmer guy who comes and picks them up, and he just seems like, oh, I'm just a nice dude, nice to meet you, and then he has the Empire flag on his back. He's like, well, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of order. As someone who has to be very careful and very concerning about my own safety when visiting certain parts of the United States, for reasons that I articulated earlier in this video, very real reasons that I articulated in this video, that read very true. That there would be a guy who's like, you know, who you'd meet instantly, come across as a nice guy, but then you'd like see a flag from a certain politician that they like, and you're like, I'm immediately uncomfortable and don't feel entirely safe. So liked that. And then the moment of tension with the stormtroopers who are just always incompetent. They're always incompetent at their job. But the little moments of tension between him and Obi-Wan trying to hide the fact that he is the Obi-Wan that they're looking for was nice to see. Though they do have like facial recognition, so I'm surprised the stormtroopers didn't recognize him off the bat. That could be an issue, but I like the tension moment if you can get beyond that possible plot hole. That being said, though, the moment when Obi-Wan does get recognized and he starts like tearing down the stormtroopers, that was so incredibly badass. The fact that that one stormtrooper fell off and like got sliced in half, I'm like, whoo, that is particularly dark for Star Wars. I mean, we've seen people get cut in half on Star Wars, but that one was particularly gruesome. So that was all really cool. And then I like the twist that the Empire officer saved them and then brought them to this sort of safe house that they were at. Again, sort of reigniting some of Obi-Wan's hope and that there are people trying to do good work and sort of like help people even though the Empire is doing really terrible things. And I also like that we get a little hint of what's happening to Force-sensitive kids, because we know some Force-sensitive kids became the Inquisitors, which, again, I'm getting little hints that the third sister is probably one of the Jedi from the temple that we saw in the opening of Order 66 in Part 1. So I think we're getting little hints of that, like when she sees the Jedi symbol when she goes into this safe house, she sees that. So I think that that's why she has this sort of, like, anger on her shoulders, that she has a grudge against Obi-Wan. So really interesting to see that. And that sort of being tied into this whole, like, kids being taken by the Empire storyline. But that does lead me to the end of this episode where we get the Vader versus Obi-Wan fight. And I was kind of shocked that we got this here. I really hope that we get a much more bigger, impressive, like Obi-Wan versus Anakin Star Wars Episode 3 battle towards the end of the series. I know we probably won't get the height of that considering that the show probably doesn't have movie budget. But I really hope we do at least get one more, because this one, there are elements of it that I really liked and elements of it that I didn't. The build up to Vader going towards Obi-Wan and like just choking people and pulling them out and just being incredibly cruel was really dark and scary. Like, it wasn't Rogue One level of like Vader just wrecking shit. We didn't get to that far, but it was still very impressive and built the dread of him coming towards Obi-Wan. And then when they finally do meet up in that like grain field, it was shot really well. I love the colors coming on their faces, and the sort of like red and blue and in the darkness was so well shot. The one moment that I just didn't really like was when I knew Obi-Wan was not gonna like go in and face Vader, but the way that it was shot where like Obi-Wan sees Vader and he's coming out of the darkness and he's like, whoop, I'm gonna run over here. And then Vader comes at him again, and it just felt like really weird. It just felt like, oh, I'm just running around. It felt like really kind of undramatic to just have Obi-Wan being like, oh, we're going this way now. So that was a little bit strange. But the end bit where like Vader's just knocking Obi-Wan over and just being like, you've gotten weak, old man. Like, all of that was really great. And then the fact that like Vader just turns on this fire and just drags Obi-Wan through the fire. And just sort of recompense for what happened back on, I want to say Mustafar. I forget the name of the planet right at the time. It might have been Mustafar. At the end of episode 3, I thought was just, it fit Vader and was so cruel. It worked really, really well, and I was kind of like, damn. But then brings me to another negative, though, because then we do have the Empire officer saving Obi-Wan, but the way it was blocked was just strange. Like, she saves him, she shoots some people, and we just saw Vader wrecking people, so, like, why is this person bothering him at all? And then, like, there's just a fire in front of him, and I get that Vader's afraid of fire. Like, makes sense, but, like, you can walk through it. Like, I don't know. It was just really weirdly blocked that Obi-Wan gets saved at this moment, and I was just like, that felt really lame. It just felt really lame. So this Obi-Wan versus Anakin fight, just the back and forth of it, there are things that I really loved, and then things that I just thought came across as almost cartoonish at moments, and not in a good way. So yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings on that fight, but hopefully there is another one coming in our future, because I'm very excited to see that. It did also make me think about continuity with episode 4, where Vader says in that episode, he's like, I feel a presence that I haven't felt since, and then he stops himself, and you're like, well, I guess he means this planet now, or whatever happens later in this series, as opposed to like the end of episode 3, which I feel reads a little less powerful, but we'll see how that comes back when we finish this series, and then I go back to watch episode 4, and we sort of see how that fits in with continuity, and sort of if it adds to continuity or takes away from the sentiment of it. We'll find that out when we get there. But at the end of the episode, we have the third sister basically essentially possibly capturing Leia, so an interesting setup going into that. Oh, I also forgot to mention the petty squabbling between the Inquisitors. Felt very Sith, liked all of that stuff. I actually think it really worked for me, the sort of like petty infighting bullshit that they're doing. Nothing particularly special, but it worked well. I enjoyed it. Properly menacing and squabbling and pettiness between all of them. So at the end of the day, kind of mixed feelings on this episode. I liked it overall. I enjoyed a lot of it, but there are some things that I'm just like, that could have been better. A little bit too much here, a little bit goofy here. But generally, the moments where it does shine, it does really shine. So yeah, I am generally positive, if not like, excited about it. But a solid third episode. That all being said, that is my review for this part 3 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Again, thank you so much for your kindnesses. I did really need that today, so thank you for that. And don't forget, I'll have my Star Trek Strange New Worlds and my Orville episodes out later this week, but then next week, because I'll be recovering from surgery, you might have to wait a little bit, but everything is as normal this week. But beyond all of that, thank you so much, everybody, and I hope that you all live long and prosper.